Back about 20 years ago, the Zane Gray Society asked me to, would I mind joining George Montgomery? Well, it was a tough job, but somebody had to do it. And they flew us in a private plane up to the Strip Country. They were doing a feature on, that year, the Society was doing a feature that year on Riders of the Purple Sage. And I tell you, as a young historian, well, it wasn't that young 20 years ago, but I mean, still, as a as a guy who's a movie fan, who was a big movie fan, to fly have that alone time with George Montgomery was one of the important treats, one of the treats of my life. To accept the plaque for the Zane Gray tonight, we welcome the past president of the Zane Gray West Society, Mr. Todd Newport. Todd.
Everybody back, hold that crowd, just to press the loud. Good mysteries, no autograph, please. Got the title of a teenage idol. Red line cramps and a brand new dance.
All righty. They asked me to say a few more words about Zane Gray, and I'll try not to repeat anything that I said up there on the video. But I wanted to kind of talk about Zane Gray's importance to history in Arizona and entertainment. You know, why is Zane Gray getting inducted into an entertainment group like this? And so I wanted to give you a little bit of data and some numbers, and I'll need some glasses for that here. As it said in the video, he was born in 1872, and you think about it, Custer's Last Stand was after that period. There was a lot of things that were changing in the West at that time, but he didn't really start writing until he was 30 years old. So all the things that he accomplished were in the second half of his life. So he did quite a bit in that short period of time. Now, Zane Grey was the top-selling, highest-paid author in the world during the first half of the 20th century. He wrote 88 books. He had 20-plus story anthologies, 140-plus articles and stories published in major magazines, 59 book and novelette serializations in those leading magazines, because they usually came out in the magazine before they went into book form. There was those 2 television series they mentioned. I'll give you an updated number because there's been a couple of films done after that date. There's 115 movies that were made from his books. And of those, 2/3 were based on Arizona novels, filmed in Arizona, or both. So Arizona was real important to what Zane Grey did and how people saw Zane Grey and how they saw the West. These films launched the career of people such as Randolph Scott, Shirley Temple, George O'Brien, George Montgomery, who was a member of the Zane Grey West Society, as Marshall stated. And there were other people that were in those Zane Grey productions: Tom Mix, Jack Holt, Tim Holt, Harry Carey Sr., John Wayne, Robert Mitchum, Noah Berry Sr., Richard Dix, and directors Henry Hathaway and Victor Fleming, who later directed Gone with the Wind. And also Jesse Lasky, who was a producer. Gray got into those movies, and they made a few movies. He decided he wanted to be a movie producer, so he formed a studio, and he did that for a while, and they did 7 pictures, 4 of which were filmed in Arizona. And he decided it was too much trouble, and he ended up selling that to Jesse Lasky, which, like was stated in the video, later became Paramount Pictures. Lasky produced 54 Zane Grey films, 36 of which were from Arizona books. Between 1922 and 1929, Zane Grey put in his contracts with Paramount that these films had to be done on location at the places that were written about in the books. So this was a big deal. This is something they couldn't do now. This is them taking everything up to Monument Valley or any of these places that were hard to get to. And things weren't easy. Even to go to Sedona wasn't an easy thing in those days. Gray would frequent the sets, and these were silent movies at that time. And this took him to places like Prescott, Payson, Sedona, Oak Creek Canyon, Flagstaff, Lee's Ferry, Tuba City, Winslow, Grand Canyon, Kayenta. They even filmed at the Batatican Cliff Dwellings, Monument Valley, and Rainbow Bridge. So there's all these places within Arizona, and that last one's out of Arizona a little bit, but they had Zane Grey films. He took the production companies there, they did the film. And it was, like we said in the video, and Marshall talked about John Ford, but about 18 years prior to that, Zane Grey brought Jesse Lasky out through that country and said, this is where you're going to film The Vanishing American. And he took him through Tuba City, and he took him all the way to Rainbow Bridge. And this was on horse and mule. They had to travel that way. Arizona pioneers that Zane Grey met during his time traveling in the country, these became characters in the stories. So these are the people that kind of formed the early Western. They were Arizonans. They didn't come from other places, really. So everything was kind of based out of there. And these early Western books and movies, they help shape how the world looks at a Western, how they look at the landscapes, what they're looking for in the background of that Western movie, the cowboys, the Western women, and even the gunfighters that were in the stories. Many of these characters were created based on those real Arizona characters. So it shows you the influence that Arizona had on him and then he had on the world. Of all the states in the novels, those 88 novels, 39 of those were about Arizona. So Zane Grey's last visit was to Arizona in 1930. He passed away in 1939. By that time, he was fishing, as you saw up there, pretty heavily. But I had a discussion with his son, Lauren, in 2005, and he said that his father was wanting to come back to Arizona. He'd missed things. He wanted to see how things had changed. And he was talking about planning a trip. So he wanted to come back, never made it. He passed away before that time. But his influence on Arizona and the rest of the world was already set in stone by that time. And his works are still affecting many things that go on today in Westerns, maybe even some of the magazines that you read. There's Western magazines out right now. We'll talk about one, I'm sure, a little bit later in the evening. And some of these are affected by what happened in those early days. So over the years, he did entertain millions of people all over the world, and the main core of that entertainment came from Arizona. So Zane Grey had 3 children. He had several grandchildren, and we're lucky enough to have one of the Zane Grey descendants here tonight. We've got Gray Murphy. He's the great-grandson of Zane Grey, and the president is Zane Grey, Inc. So at this time, I'd like to bring up Gray Murphy to accept the plaque. All right, great. And in recognition of outstanding achievement and major contribution to the entertainment culture of the state of Arizona, Zane Grey is inducted into the Arizona Music and Entertainment Hall of Fame, November 13th, 2016.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming out tonight and supporting the Entertainment and Music Hall of Fame. And also to let you know that Zane Grey's not done yet, okay? You all know about his books, you know about his movies and the great achievements that he's accomplished up to this point. Well, in March, we're opening up with an opera called Riders of the Purple Sage, featuring Zane Grey. Some of his actual scriptures from the book will actually be sung in the opera. So if you're interested in a little opera or a little history or a little both, you might want to check out Riders of the Purple Sage, the new opera coming out in March.